Story 1. I was on my deathbed and thought I wished my mother were here. When I woke up in the intensive care unit, she was not there and did not care. Thank you for the online kindness. It means a lot. You are all great people, and I very much appreciate everyone here. Story 2. What is this idiot doing? Back off, truck. Why is my bike above me? Hello, sheep. Story 3. Oh shit. My sister had to see me drown. I felt pretty calm about it, though. Story 4. I told my dad his shoe was untied. Then I promptly fell down a 20-foot cliff into the underbrush. I suffered a broken arm, a fractured skull, and a ruptured kidney. I woke up 2 weeks later to my dad thanking me for letting him know, saying he could have tripped. Story 5. I blacked out. Before that, I thought I shouldn't have gone out today. My body was going into shock and my heart rate was dropping quickly. Story 6. I almost died in a fiery explosion at my old job. My first thought was that I was going to look like such an idiot without eyebrows. Story 7. As someone performed the Heimlich maneuver on me, I remember thinking how embarrassing it would be to die at a Renaissance fair. It was the day before my 29th birthday, so I was also disappointed I wasn't going to make it to 30. Thank you all for the responses. It seems choking at a Renaissance fair is actually fairly common. If anyone knows a cigar salesman who was working at Scarborough Fair 6 or so years ago, please give him my thanks for saving my life. Story 8. My heart stopped beating for 7 seconds while I was eating dinner in my hospital bed, waiting to be discharged. I realized I was going to pass out and put my arm across my plate so I would not fall face first into it. All I could think was that this was going to make a mess. They really took their time with the paperwork. I ended up walking out of there 7 days later with a pacemaker at the age of 46. Update. Wow, thanks for all the well wishes. I am now 57 and retired. I still have atrial fibrillation and cannot do much without becoming completely exhausted. Nothing seems to help. Now that I have the time, I do not have the energy to do much, so I will ride it out and call it a day. Story 9. I almost died on a mountain last month. While I was free soloing the cliff, my only thought was that I would give anything to be home and safe. Story 10. Hello? Have you ever had a headache so bad you called your parents to ask if you were still on their healthcare plan, even though you live in Canada and they live in the United States of America? Yes. I have had that pain. I felt as if my head was going to implode. I was half right. I had a brain clot that then bled. It was a stroke and an aneurysm at the same time. My last thought before I regained consciousness weeks later was that I did not want to die in this ground-level apartment. Story 11. Shit, wasn't the car that hit me white? I looked down at a car beneath me. I had been hit hard enough that I bounced over the first car and had enough airtime to clear the second one. Props to the driver of the third vehicle. He must have slammed on the brakes the moment he saw me, because he brought the cement truck to a stop before it reached me. It was the second time I had been hit by a car as a pedestrian. I am now much more careful when crossing streets. Not that it has helped. I seem to be a magnet for cars. Story 12. That is it? As I looked at the surface of the water I could not reach. Story 13. My throat felt strange, my gums were itchy, and there was a blackness like a deep sleep. I woke up a bit later and found out I was allergic to crab the hard way. Story 14. God. Why can't I breathe right now? I wish I could. I'm getting tired. Anaphylactic shock each time. Story 15. I was run over by a bus last year. When I went under the tires, my thought was, but it's Wednesday. Story 16. What the fuck? Ow. Son of a bitch. A fuck. Don't run me over. I was being run over by a car while on my motorcycle. Update, 2 things. First, it was a hit and run. They left me for dead in the middle of the road. Second, to everyone asking if there was permanent damage. Yes, my short-term memory is a little off some days because I slammed my face against the side of his car. I had a helmet on, but I still tasted that metallic taste you get after a nasty head impact, which likely means I had mild bleeding in my skull. Physically, I got lucky in terms of not road rashing too much because I was wearing gloves and a fairly baggy sweatshirt. The fleece shredded away, so I did not. I have a permanent limp on my right side from when my hips hit his car and then the ground, and now I wear a knee brace on my right knee because it wants to twist unnaturally when I turn. I have to take ibuprofen every day before work or I cannot function very well. I had no insurance, car, or medical, so I limped to the nearest gas station, bought a couple of beers to help my muscles relax. They were spasming out of control, and called my brother to pick me and my bike up. After I could walk again, which took about 2 months, I fixed the bike and still ride it to this day, although now I do not ride on weekends because of reckless drunk people. Story 17. I was being electrocuted. I had been working all day atop a scissor lift when the electricians left a 277-volt line live. While I was standing and reaching to complete the final low-voltage wiring run, I contacted the live line. I saw a white light at the end of the tunnel. All I experienced was throbbing 60 Hz noise and the white light. My last thought was whether I could will my knees to unlock. They did, since I am here typing this. I suffered severe electrical burns, but I am still here living my life. Story 18. 3 times. Once I almost drowned in the deep end of a pool when I was 5. Once I was trapped under a flipped all-terrain vehicle in a river. And once I was shot at by a man who thought I was a deer. I thought of my mother crying each time. Story 19. I thought about how I did not buy enough pizzas from my favorite pizza place. It is quite good, but thinking about pizza when you believe you are dying is depressing in retrospect. Story 20. I was stabbed in the neck by someone robbing my house. I thought I was going to die. I hate myself, but I begged the man who stabbed me to stay because I did not want to die alone. He said sorry and walked away. That broke my heart. Thankfully, he called 911 for me. Story 21. Who is holding me underwater? I almost passed out. I did not even know the child. Story 22. I can't believe this is how I die. I was drunk and fell off a 30-foot cliff into about 2 feet of water at Lake Havasu, Arizona, during spring break. It just hurt really badly. Story 23. I have something wrong with my health where medications are a hard no for me. I overdosed on a normal dose of albuterol and on a normal dose of promethazine. There were some other disturbing occurrences I do not care to discuss. When I overdosed on promethazine, my fever shot through the roof, 105 to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, and would not go away. I was in and out of consciousness, and my wife said I was talking in my sleep a lot. I was completely, without a shred of doubt, convinced I was in the middle of a war between humans and elves. I was talking about how we had to split the house with them to prevent another war. My breathing was impaired, the fever would not subside, I could not get up, and I could not really sleep. My last thought was basically, hopefully the elves are okay with splitting the kitchen because we need to eat. It was a really frightening time. Story 24. Fuck. Why is it getting so hard to breathe? Why does my chest hurt so much? A collapsed lung in the middle of gym class in high school. Story 25. I was nearly run over in a town square when a car drove through the square instead of around it and went onto the sidewalk. The first and only thing I said to my friend next to me before we dove out of the way was, well, that's not good. Story 26. Honestly, once due to a boulder and once in a motorcycle accident. Well, this is going to hurt. Story 27. Just looking at these comments, I didn't realize how many people go through traumatic experiences. I hope you are all doing better. Story 28. I was weirdly calm. My mind went quiet. Everything slowed right the fuck down. Afterwards, my mind screamed. For what it's worth, I was in a car accident at 100 kilometers per hour. I spun 270 degrees in front of an 18-wheeler, crossed 2 lanes, went down an embankment, and slid between 2 concrete drainage pipes. I could have been hit by the truck, rolled, or struck the pipes, which would have crushed me. Story 29. I thought I was having a drug overdose. I remember thinking how disappointed my mom would be with me. Story 30. Get to the kitchen. Sugar. I woke up on the floor, freezing and drenched in sweat. Hypoglycemia does that. My dog curled around me, trying to keep me warm. Luckily, my liver released glycogen when my blood glucose was low, and it worked out that time. I have never told my husband about it. Story 31. A little over 10 years ago, I had the Widowmaker heart attack. I spent the first day in the hospital on a balloon pump that assisted my heart until they could perform surgery the next day. They told my wife that my chances of surviving were only about 20%. The priest and family were there. In the morning, as they wheeled me into the operating room, I was doing a Monty Python bit about getting the machine that goes ping in case the administrator comes by with the surgical nurse, who was also a Monty Python fan. The look on the surgeon's face was priceless, and I was chuckling as I went under. My last thought was, "Faye, we've got this." The surgeon later told me I was the only patient in his career who came into his operating room laughing, and he said my attitude may have been an important factor in my survival. Story 32. They will never find me. I almost drowned in Hawaii in a rip current when I was 10 and no one noticed. Thankfully, I was a very strong swimmer and managed to swim out of it, but I was quite a ways out. The beach was very narrow with rocks on each side, so I had to let a huge wave carry me the last 20 yards. I crawled up on the beach, exhausted, and got yelled at for staying out too long. Update: learn rip current and current safety. Do not fight a rip current. Swim sideways if possible. Consider using personal flotation devices if you are not a strong swimmer. This is especially important in rivers. I do not remember exactly where this was. It was 1988, and I think it was a small hotel beach. Thank you for the comments and support. This was my first post with over 250 upvotes. Please take your children for swimming lessons as early as possible. I learned when I was 3 or 4, and being a strong swimmer has undoubtedly saved my life several times. Story 33. I was gridlocked in traffic with a wildfire on both sides of my vehicle. I couldn't even touch the window. It was that hot. Our cell tower was knocked out, so I couldn't tell my family and friends who were not in the car that I loved them. I sat oddly peaceful because there was nothing I could do. My whole family was sweating and my little brother was crying. I was 15 and accepted that my life was what it was. I didn't bother thinking about what I had done differently or what I wanted to accomplish, because I felt I didn't matter. I was convinced I would die quietly with my family in a car. I couldn't think, so I put my headphones in and played my favorite songs, thinking maybe I could die to one of them. When traffic started moving again after a few hours, I could barely stay awake. I remember the first time I showered after the fire. There was soot running down the drain and I just cried. Since then, I started telling people I loved them. I decided to live for myself. I came out and I worked toward a future. I even sat at my first bonfire this year. It was horrible. Story 34. I never got to have my own cat. I was 6 years old, in the hospital with infectious mononucleosis and a streptococcal infection. I was being given antibiotics to which I had a severe, violent allergic reaction. Everything was slow and fading, and I do not know how I am still alive. Luck, I guess. I got my cat, though. Story 35. I hydroplaned about 15 minutes after getting off the phone with my boyfriend. As I spun out into the median, I clenched my eyes shut and could only see his face. I figured if I were going to die, at least I would die thinking of someone who loved me. We had only been dating for about 4 months at the time, but it was the moment I knew I would marry him. Almost a decade later, he is still the last thing I see when I close my eyes. The nerd. Story 36. I needed to throw up again, even though my stomach was empty. Do not worry. It was not enough to kill me, but it did give me pharmacophobia. Story 37. I pictured my husband coming home to an empty house, and I desperately hoped people would reach out and make sure he was okay. I could not stand the thought of him being alone. Story 38. I remember having a piece of food lodged in my throat when I was young. I stood there thinking, well, this is it. And I just accepted it. I really do not understand it because I am terrified of death and do not know how I could have just accepted it. Edit. This comment blew up. I have never received 10,000 upvotes. I do not want to be one of those posts that thanks everyone, but it is a strange feeling waking up to 70 Reddit notifications. Story 39. I was in a fight and did not realize I had been stabbed in the liver and a lung. I walked away with my friend and collapsed in an alley. I remember bleeding out as calming waves of euphoria washed over me and I thought, I've lived enough. I'm okay with this. I blacked out and woke up in the back of an ambulance with waves of intense pain assaulting my body. Dying is not awful. Surviving is awful. Story 40. Every time I have been at my lowest points with suicidal ideation, the only thought that kept me from following through was that my cat would miss me, and I would miss him too. Whenever I tried to picture the end, a vision of him would flash instead. Thanks, Dexter. You saved my life, little buddy. Update. Thanks for the awards, strangers. I am in a much better place now for those who asked. Therapy works, friends. Story 41. I am a little late to the game, and I think I have posted this before. A nurse told me, "You are going to be here when I get back. Okay?" I kind of brushed it off with yes. And then she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "No, you are going to still be here when I get back. Right?" The way she said it just rocked me. All I could think was, I have to stay awake. I have to stay here. I did not know it at the time, but all my organs were failing. I still credit her with saving my life that night. Story 42. As the car left the road and sailed into the trees, I was a calm passenger. Oh, so this is how it ends. Interesting. I was at peace because everything was out of my hands and I was just watching it happen. Story 43. I was 16 years old. My lower right wisdom tooth came in and fractured the tooth next to it. That caused an abscess that led to an infection in my jawbone. My mother took me to the emergency room because she thought I had lockjaw. I could not open my mouth because it was so swollen. The doctor said I could not be treated there. So I was transported by ambulance to another hospital an hour away. I slipped in and out of consciousness while being prepared for surgery. My father was there. The last thing I remember thinking was that I did not want to die because it would devastate so many people. I cried, and my father calmed me and told me he loved me. I recovered in the hospital for a month. My then boyfriend, now husband, visited. I missed my semester finals that year and was discharged on Christmas Eve. Thank you, everyone. It was a hard time, but I got through it. Thank you for sharing your stories and for the awards. There was some misunderstanding about the finals. My high school had semester finals and end-of-year finals. I was referring to the semester finals. Sorry for the confusion. Story 44. Fuck. Am I having a heart attack? There's no way. I'm not thin enough for that. Those were my thoughts as my heart went into palpitations due to a severe electrolyte imbalance because of anorexia. I was thin enough. The doctor told me I could have dropped dead at any moment. Took me a while to begin recovering and required several hospitalizations, but 6 years later I am doing pretty well. Story 45. Everything feels so slow and I cannot move. I am experiencing an anaphylactic shock and am about to lose consciousness. Story 46. In retrospect, I never actually came close to dying, but I did not know that. I was flying an airplane alone over a large lake when the engine started acting up. I radioed Houston and identified myself as November 4951 Alpha, reporting that I had lost my engine. A few seconds later, the engine sputtered and then went silent. Propeller airplanes are loud. The silence was deafening. There was a brief moment of panic. Then I did everything I had been taught and eventually got the plane safely on the ground. For a while, I was sure I would end up at the bottom of the lake. My thoughts were simply, how in the fuck do I fix this? Story 47. Mine is a little different, but I think it still counts. My heart completely stopped and I was technically not alive for a short time. There were no thoughts and no bright light. It just felt like nothing. Story 48. Funny story. When I was 10, my family went to Florida on vacation with some extended family. My parents returned to Massachusetts a few days before my brother and I so we could stay longer with my aunt and cousins. It was my first time traveling with just my older brother and my second time on a plane. The first was the trip there. Coming into Logan Airport, our airplane started to fall out of the sky, quite literally. Apparently it only happened for about 3 to 5 seconds, but the pressure change made the oxygen masks fall from the ceiling. I had seen enough movies at that point to know that basically meant we were going to die. I was crying and freaking out like everyone else on the aircraft, the most frightening experience of my life by far. But I distinctly remember thinking, I am never going to get to finish my Age of Empires 2 campaign. A video game was ostensibly my last thought. Edit. This got a lot of attention. Thank you, kind strangers. It seems it was wind that caused it. And it was the William Wallace campaign for all those Age of Empires fans. Story 49. I felt dizzy and nearly passed out when my heart stopped. Thankfully, it restarted a few seconds later. Story 50. I tried to commit suicide by drowning in a public pool when I was 8 and short for my age, so I deliberately went to the deep end. My last thoughts were that at least Daddy would not see this, and the rest of my family never paid attention to me, so I was coming to heaven, God. The lifeguard rescued me just before I passed out. My mother yelled at me for going to the deep end, saying I should have known better, and told me to sit on the grass for the rest of the day. I was being sexually abused by my mother's father, and I wanted it to finally end. Edit. I want to thank everyone for the support and well wishes. You brought tears to my eyes. I have been trying to keep up with all the responses, but it is getting a little hard, so I will thank you all here. Story 51. At age 14, I almost drowned after getting caught in the waves on a beach trip. After fighting as hard as I could, which was a huge mistake, I lay on the bottom in the sand. I had two thoughts. My parents are going to be so mad, and I could not believe I could not even save myself. I had recently completed a junior life-saving course, which was pool-based and did not cover swimming in the ocean. What I did not realize was that the waves had pushed me toward shore, and I was in 4 feet of water at that point. My friends saw me and pulled me out. Story 52. If I fall asleep here, I won't wake up. Lying on train tracks. The train was stopped about an hour's walk ahead. I fell asleep, then I woke up. I'm really sorry you're feeling this distressed. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number right away. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact local emergency services or a crisis line in your country. I can help you find local resources or stay with you here if you want. Story 53. I tried to commit suicide with sleeping pills. My last thoughts were pure relief because either I would finally get the help I needed or the pain would end forever. I am really sorry you felt so overwhelmed. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number now, for example, 911 in the United States. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are outside the United States, please contact local emergency services or a local crisis line. If you are not in immediate danger, please consider reaching out to a trusted person or a mental health professional. I can help you find crisis resources in your area, help make a safety plan, or stay with you here and listen. Story 54. I had the worst strain of infectious mononucleosis currently known, streptococcal pharyngitis, a double ear infection, upper and lower respiratory influenza, a sinus infection, and conjunctivitis. At the same time, they started testing me for a brain tumor before they knew what was wrong in the emergency room. My vision started fading and I couldn't hear, and the only thing I could think about was that I was going to ruin my parents, siblings, friends, and girlfriends' lives by dying so young and suddenly. I didn't want to cause that kind of emotional pain to my loved ones. I thought I wouldn't be able to say goodbye. I was so dehydrated that my organs were starting to shut down. Had I waited another day to go to the emergency room, I would have died from total organ failure. My body was producing so many white blood cells that my counts were higher than some of the nurses and doctors had ever seen in their careers. I received 3 separate bags of intravenous fluids. They were keeping me alive at the time. They gave me a huge amount of prednisone, over 200 milligram doses. I was high as a kite for a week. I don't remember much from that week, but somehow I got home with my parents, lived on smoothies, and slept a lot. I even managed to play Apex and win matches without remembering doing it. They made me drink 2 to 3 liters of water a day. I produced a lot of phlegm. The week passed and the prednisone reduced my flu symptoms and helped my body fight the mononucleosis symptoms. But steroids can make bacterial infections like streptococcal pharyngitis, ear infections, and conjunctivitis feel worse. I couldn't speak for 2 weeks. After the steroids, I was put on an extremely powerful antibiotic and had to stay home for another 3 to 4 days because it completely wiped out the good bacteria in my body. 3 weeks after visiting the emergency room, I went back to college. 5 weeks later, I finished the semester with a 3 for grade point average. I'm pretty proud of myself. Story 55. I was in an accident once. They had to use a defibrillator to restart my heart because I had flatlined in the ambulance. It all happened so fast and I do not really remember anything. There were 3 others in the car and we all survived. A friend in the back seat says I repeatedly yelled "oh shit" after the car flipped a few times and came to a stop upside down. I have no memory of it at all. Story 56. I was very sick in high school and began losing consciousness on the school bathroom floor after vomiting and soiling myself. My last thought was that I hoped whoever found me would not realize I had soiled myself. This happened on several other occasions and became a regular part of my life. Story 57. 6th grade end-of-year trip. We were at a ropes course park with rock climbing and tall catwalks. I was attached to a belay while my classmates were 30 feet below. I climbed the pole and chickened out when I got to the top, so I signaled my teacher and she gave me the signal to lean back and I would be rappelled down. This is why you look before you leap, folks, because those kids were not paying attention and I dropped off that catwalk like I had never been there. As I fell through the air with the ground rushing up to meet me, I saw an absolutely beautiful, breathtaking burst of light through the trees in front of me. It was like sunshine coming through the leaves of a tree you are lazing under on a hot summer day. I was so taken by the sight that would have been my last thought. Christ, that is ever Bo. Before my classmates grabbed the rappel rope and I stopped falling. My mother had died about 6 months earlier, and I was convinced it was her, a guardian angel, whatever you want to call it. Spooky. Story 58. I got hit by a car while crossing a busy street to meet my older sister for pizza when I was 14. She was waiting for me right across the street, and I don't know whether I did not look both ways because I was excited to see her or the driver ran a red light. Cannot remember. My last thoughts were, where is my sister? Story 59. I was septic. I remember being so cold and wanting to sleep. My baby was 6 days old, and I could not gather the strength to hold her. I did not remember visitors or anything for 5 days. Story 60. Oh, crap. Is that a car? A few years later, I said the same thing. Yes, I've almost been hit by a car twice. Story 61. I ran across a busy street when I thought it was clear, but it was not, and I almost got hit by a pickup truck. My last thought was, fuck, this is either going to be really close or it is going to really hurt. I also imagined what my body would look like if I were hit. Would there be a lot of blood? Would bones be sticking out? That kind of thing. Story 62. I was inches away from a car accident. This is going to be very expensive. Story 63. I tried to hang myself a few years ago. I was drinking but not drunk, and although I had planned it for a while, I had not planned to do it that night. It just seemed like a good last day. I used my work belt and tied a knot to jam into my bedroom door. I kicked a small stool out from under me. I remember thinking, good, this is it. You deserve this. My legs were thrashing as I fought the urge to reach for the stool. Then nothing. I woke up on the floor. My neck, toes, and back were incredibly sore. I have no idea how long I was out. It turned out the belt buckle could not support my weight and flew across the room. I could not find it for a month. Story 64. There goes the breathing. There goes the sight. My heart is going to be next. At least I am warm. My blood glucose was less than 20 and had dropped while I was asleep. I had been a type 1 diabetic for over 20 years by then, so it was not my first severe hypoglycemic episode, but it was definitely my worst. One of those things must have jolted me awake in my warm bed, and I thrashed around violently until I could get to my phone and call emergency services. I lay there under the blankets with those thoughts, certain I was feeling those things, and I lost consciousness again. I came to with intravenous lines and electrodes attached, surrounded by paramedics. Their response time saved me. I wear a Dexcom now. No more scary sugar crashes for me. Story 65. I am so alone. I was walking home from the bar one night when two men with guns held me up. I was tipsy, and all I could think about was how, despite the many houses around us, everyone was probably asleep or watching television inside. I did not feel sad. It was just an observation. Story 66. I had been rushed back to the hospital after a tonsillectomy because an artery had opened. I was hemorrhaging and waiting for the surgeon to arrive. I knew I was about to pass out, and I said to myself, "Of course this is how you die." I shook my head in disappointment as blood shot from my throat like a scene from a horror movie. I passed out. The surgery went well, but I suffered a cardiac arrest in recovery because I had clotting in my lungs. I received cardiopulmonary resuscitation, was revived, intubated, and transferred to the intensive care unit. I woke up 2 days later with no memory of what had happened. Life has been better on every level since. I basically have another chance at life. I am grateful. Story 67. I know I am a little late and not many people will see this. When I was 15, I was at a party and I was very drunk, and so was everyone else, not in the United States, of course. Then a young man, probably 2 years older at most, about 17, pulled a gun on me. A real gun was pointed at my stomach and he said, "Do you want to fucking die?" I could tell he was also very intoxicated, so I freaked out. I played it off by saying, "No, not today." But the whole time I thought, I am about to get shot and everyone here is going to watch me die, and that will be really embarrassing. So even in the face of death, I was still a very self-conscious, awkward child, laughing hard. Story 68. I remember each handful of pills going down so easily, like swallowing a mouthful of food. It surprised me. I normally struggle to take more than a single pill at a time, but I wasn't struggling then. I had taken 6 handfuls of a small mix of medications. Took a moment before anything came to mind. Everything was so quiet. The silence was almost deafening. My mind became foggy. My stomach suddenly turned queasy. My legs and arms felt tremendously heavy and shaky. As I tried to get up, I felt my heart change pace and beat loudly, like thunder in my ears. The first thing I managed to mumble, after fumbling to call my best friend, was, "I messed up." Today marks 4 years since I left the psychiatric ward after my attempted overdose. I'm still alive and it feels good. Story 69. It was a visual experience, not a thought. I almost died from coronavirus disease 2019. I still cannot get the image of my husband grieving alone after everyone leaves my funeral out of my head. This haunts me. Story 70. When I was about 11 years old, I was home alone one day during the summer, watching television while eating Skittles. I liked to put a bunch in my mouth and form a Skittle ball that I would chew. Something on the show made me laugh and I swallowed the ball, which became lodged in my throat. For a few seconds I experienced sheer terror because I realized there was no one to help me and I might die. Thankfully, I remembered a cartoon or movie where someone jammed their stomach on a chair to dislodge something from their throat. I lunged at the corner of the recliner as hard as I could with my stomach. It worked and the small ball popped out. I was very lucky because I had no idea what I was doing. It was one of the worst feelings I have ever experienced. I never ate Skittles that way again, and to this day I am still a bit paranoid about eating certain things when I am alone. Story 71. I was driving when I had an accident and flipped the car. Right when the radio changed songs, all I could think as I lay upside down watching headlights come at me was that I couldn't believe I was going to die listening to Demi Lovato. Story 72. A year and a half ago, I broke my neck in a skiing accident. Lying there, I couldn't move or feel anything. I thought I might be a quadriplegic for the rest of my life, and that I might not even make it. Letting that sink in for a minute, I surveyed the expanse of my life in my mind's eye and realized I had led an amazing, exciting life. I would like more time, but if this were the end, I was okay with it and grateful for the life I had. Then an immense wave of peace and gratitude swept over me, and I prayed that I had done my best and that God would take me in his arms. Then I heard skis and the ski patrol arrive. Today, I have recovered 98% of my pre-accident abilities. Story 73. I don't remember my last thoughts. I was T-boned by a truck while riding my motorcycle, and my leg below the knee was amputated at the scene. My femur was also snapped in two. My first coherent memory was being told that I had been medically sedated for 2 weeks and that my left leg had been amputated. I have plenty of disjointed, blurry memories from those 2 weeks. It felt like acid, alcohol blackouts, and dimethyltryptamine combined into a chaotic, fragmented haze. Story 74. At 19, I was caught in an electrical current and could not let go. While being shocked, I thought I was going to die. All I felt was extreme sadness because I had not yet had children. I was rescued and later had my children. Story 75. I had meningitis. I was in pain and delirious with fever. I accepted it. I felt my body could not fight it, and that was okay. I do not remember several days in the hospital afterward, but I pulled through. Story 76. A few years ago at Riot Fest, when System of a Down came on, I was trampled. I thought I would die. I tried desperately to get up, but my body gave out. It felt exactly like what Jon Snow experienced in the Battle of the Bastards. I later realized that episode aired after the concert, but when I watched it I thought, holy fuck, that is exactly how it felt. Luckily, I was pulled out and tossed to the front before I passed out. My last plea was calling out to Serge, hoping he would see the suffering on my face and stop the show for a moment. I did not listen to System of a Down for a few years after that. It brought back memories. Story 77. I once thought Final Fantasy XIII would be the last game I ever played. That was what I was most bummed out about. Story 78. Man, this is it? I hope my parents are okay. I was shot in the chest. Story 79. I almost overdosed on heroin. As I sat in my buddy's truck, dying, all I could think was, where is the pain? It was not enjoyable, but it was not painful. Story 80. I hope I don't go from fire. My bet is shrapnel. Almost hit by a crashing plane. Story 81. I was choking on a piece of pork rib and thought that I couldn't believe I was dying at this loser's birthday party surrounded by strangers. Story 82. There was a car accident in mid-December on the interstate. I could not believe I was going to die while the song "You Are a Mean One," Mr. Grinch, was playing on the radio. I laughed. Story 83. Kidney failure culminated in very high potassium levels, leading to hyperkalemia and extremely high blood pressure. I was placed in a medically induced coma. The last thing I remember is being in immense pain and wanting it to stop. Then it stopped and I woke up days later. Story 84. I was heavily sedated and going through alcohol withdrawal, but my seizures would not stop and my liver was failing. I remember thinking the people who were actually trying to save my life were trying to kill me. I have never been so scared. Story 85. I got knocked out, and as everything was going black, my only thought was, shit, I am dead. I woke up a few minutes later and everything was cool. Story 86. I almost drowned while snorkeling with my best friend. I know that instincts can cause a person who is drowning to pull down the person helping them, so as I was going under I said, please do not come help me. Story 87. At 18, I thought I was going to die in a horrible car accident. My last thoughts were of my parents and how heartbroken they would be. I will never forget that feeling. Story 88. I remember a surreal calm washing over me. I gave in to forces that were pulling me away from this world. I had a bicycle accident a couple of years ago, and that is all I remember. The rest of my memory is blank. I do not remember how the accident happened. I only remember feeling calm and one with the universe. Story 89. When I was 6 and my sister was 9, we didn't realize the beach had flagged areas for swimmers, surfers, and no-swim zones. We were collecting shells when we saw larger shells farther under the surf and waded deeper until a rip current swept us out. My sister floated okay, but I exhausted myself trying too hard. I tried to cling to her, but she kept pushing me off. My head stopped bobbing above the water and I began to drown. My panicked last thought was that I would drown and my sister would let me die. A lifeguard spotted us and pulled us out. I was okay except for some salt water in my lungs. I know my sister was only trying to stay afloat, but at the time it looked as though she was trying to kill me. Story 90. former heroin addict and dealer here. I dealt for about half of the decade I used. Being a small blonde woman in New Mexico, I used a lot of my male friends to drive me around and make sales for me in exchange for keeping me safe, while I kept them from going into withdrawal. One of these men especially only cared about getting his daily heroin, and I had recently been prescribed Klonopin. I barely remember about a week of combining the two. Don't do it. Before this happened, I would inject heroin, then take a Klonopin and wake up in my back seat for pickups and sales. It's strange how safe you can feel with the scummiest people while extremely high. I guess I'd been on that routine, shoot heroin, take Klonopin, and nod in my back seat, and the current man caught on and told another woman he fancied. I last remember her getting into the front passenger seat, with the driver in front and me in the back, lying there like a foolish addict with too much confidence. She introduced herself politely because I had just made a big sale, and my so-called friend got his cut and was going to share it with the woman. I remember thinking, fuck yeah, I love Hershey's with almonds. I cooked up a shot as well, even though about 10 minutes earlier I'd snorted some of my benzodiazepines. The last thing I remember is my so-called friend and the woman laughing and offering me chocolate. They ended up ditching me in the back of my car when I became unresponsive, but I happened to be in a part of town where a real friend noticed my car, found me, and saved my life. I was basically dead, covered in chocolate, half naked in the back of my car. To this day, I can only hope the half-naked part was just me being extremely high in skimpy clothes and not exposing myself while rolling around in the back seat. Story 91. The closest I came to death was earlier this year. I had abnormal uterine bleeding so severe I could not stay conscious. I fainted 4 times in less than 12 hours and vomited twice while unconscious. Luckily, I had been sitting up when I came to, so I did not choke. At one point, I felt like I was dreaming. Not a flashing before the eye sensation, but a mundane dream. I must have entered rapid eye movement sleep. As the day went on, I reached the point where I could not get up off the bathroom floor. I could not even sit up without passing out again. An ambulance was called and I was taken out on a stretcher. I had only a vague awareness of what was happening around me. I had a strong urge to sleep, but I knew I should not, and I kept wanting to close my eyes. My best friend, who was there, kept nudging me until the ambulance arrived. I was so out of it that I no longer felt fear or much awareness. I only felt like sleeping, but it did not seem like anything good would happen if I did. Once I got to the emergency room, I was told that my hemoglobin was 4.6 and dropping fast. One of the nurses told me point blank that if I had not come in, I would most likely have died. I received multiple blood transfusions to stabilize me. Uterine fibroids are no joke. Story 92. Just keep talking, and maybe he will not shoot. A gun was pointed at my face. I kept talking, and he finally put it down. That was 40 years ago, and I still remember the terror to this day. Context. A high school friend picked a friend and me up to go to a party. On the drive there, it became clear he was suicidal or homicidal. I was not sure which. He had taken his father's gun. He parked the car, pulled out the gun, pointed it at me, and demanded to know why he should not kill all of us. I thought quickly, offering reasons and asking questions. He held the gun on me for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, he lowered it and said okay. He took us back to my place, dropped us off, and drove away. I never found out what happened. He never returned to school. I suspect he was hospitalized. Story 93. I don't remember. I was sleeping, and when I woke up, my parents discovered I had been bitten by a black widow spider. Story 94. It ended up being a false alarm. I was at a movie theater about 30 minutes into Magic Mike with my mother and my godmother, in the first theater on the right. Suddenly a young woman came in shouting that there was a shooting. Everyone in my group hit the deck. We were seated closest in our row to the aisle, which meant that if a shooter entered and walked up the row, we would have been directly in their path. In that moment, I thought about what would be best for my family, especially my younger brother, who had just entered middle school. I subtly positioned myself over my mother in a way that was not obvious to her but would allow me to protect her if someone came in. It was terrifying, but I distracted myself from fear by thinking logically about my loved ones. After everyone moved toward the exit and behind the projection screen, I was no longer scared. I was focused on one goal: to protect my mother if things went wrong. Story 95. You know what? This isn't that bad. I hope it's not scary for whoever finds me. 2016 was a shit year. Story 96. I drowned in the river and was resuscitated. My last thought was, oh, drowning is nowhere near as bad as I expected. The body passes out before it allows a person to breathe in water, and panic subsides, leaving a woozy, dazed feeling. At least that was my experience. It felt oddly calm. Story 97. I technically died for a couple of seconds, or so I'm told. I'm pretty sure my last thoughts were being mad at myself for walking alone, even though it was the middle of the day. Story 98. It is not me, but Roald Dahl comes to mind. He was surrounded by his loved ones and chose beautiful words. It is not that I am afraid of dying. It is just that I will miss you all so much. Those were the perfect final words. Then a nurse suddenly pricked him with a needle, and he responded, "Ow, fuck." Those were the last words he ever said. Story 99. I yelled to my friends, "I'm fine," while my life flashed before my eyes. My heart felt like it was swelling, and for a moment I thought I was dead. I hit a tree while riding uphill and ended up hanging upside down, my immobilized foot wedged in the saddle stirrup on the wrong side of the saddle, on the wrong side of a steep hill, on a horse that was prone to falling when unbalanced, and I was not wearing a helmet. Weeks later, I sat up in bed and cried when it hit me that I had, in that moment, accepted that I was going to die. Being caught and left hanging might have saved me from a broken neck. Story 100. I feel nothing. This is nice. That is what happens when you develop severe chronic pain at the age of 14 and fall into a coma. Story 101. I accidentally ate peanut butter and had a severe allergic reaction. As I was lying on the couch with my face swelling and my throat closing, I thought to myself, I look like Darth Sidious. That was the funniest thing to me in that moment. Story 102. I was 17 and on a long-distance traditional cedar canoe journey on the West Coast. Because our navigator was away for the day, we became lost and the radio was not picking up any signals. Night fell and we began to feel hypothermic. We had no supplies. I remember feeling grateful that I had at least experienced the beautiful sunrises and the strong sense of community along the way. But I was also sad because I still had so much I wanted to do in life. Story 103. I remember thinking, I am so fat. Why are these people trying to force me to eat? I do not need food to live. Food is obsolete. All it does is make me more fat. I had bulimic anorexia for 5 years and was too underweight to walk. I fainted regularly and my cognitive skills were very poor. Later I found a Christmas card I had made and the letters were not even the right way round. I was in the hospital and all I did was sit in the warm shower because I was so cold all the time. They told me I had a couple of months to live, but I refused to eat. Now, for years later, I am doing pretty well. It took a specialized hospital and 3 months of expensive care to save me. While an eating disorder never completely leaves the mind, I am much better now. It is scary how my mind distorted my body image. I was a skeleton and all I saw was fat. Story 104. My grandmother wrote a letter to her sister the day I was born, saying, "His smile puts the sun to shame. She is a renowned poet where I am from. During my second round of chemotherapy, I wondered whether I lived up to any measure of that compliment." Story 105. Why is my dog visiting me? She died last year. I am in the hospital on my first night after my pancreas exploded. Story 106. My mother died from an embolism during a long car ride a few years ago. A couple of months ago, I had a serious heart problem on the way home from a vacation and remember thinking, well, this is ironic, while I was in and out of consciousness. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.